Imagine being told, a Boeing 777 with 239 people on board has vanished. No crash site, no coordinates, just open ocean. Within days, more than 30 aircraft and dozens of ships from multiple nations are searching. Malaysia, China, Australia, the United States. The operation spreads across thousands of square kilometers. Nothing. Satellite data reveals something shocking. The aircraft kept flying for nearly 7 hours after it disappeared from civilian radar. Not minutes. Hours. South, into one of the most remote regions of the Indian Ocean. The search zone shifts. It becomes one of the largest and most expensive in aviation history. Deep-sea sonar scans map the ocean floor 4,000 meters below the surface. Still nothing. In 2015, a piece of the wing, a flaperon, washes ashore on Reunion Island. Confirmed, it belongs to MH370. The plane ended in the ocean, but no black boxes are found, no cockpit recording, no final explanation. You have the radar data, you have the satellite handshakes, you have the drift models, and yet, you still cannot answer the one question that matters. What happened in those final hours? The question was no longer whether the aircraft had fallen. The question was where. By the time satellite data confirmed that flight MH370 had continued flying south for hours, the search effort had already begun. In the wrong place. In the first days after the disappearance, aircraft and naval vessels were concentrated in the South China Sea. That was the expected crash corridor. Crews flew low, scanning for floating wreckage. Radar logs were replayed. Shipping lanes were checked. Oil slicks were investigated. Nothing matched. When analysts confirmed that the aircraft had continued sending automated satellite handshakes for nearly 7 hours, everything shifted. The original search grid was no longer valid. The aircraft could have traveled thousands of kilometers beyond its last civilian radar position. Now imagine standing in a coordination center, watching technicians redraw the search zone in real time. A map expands, then expands again. Fuel endurance calculations are layered over satellite timing arcs. 2 possible corridors appear, one north, one south. The northern corridor is slowly eliminated through radar data from multiple countries. No unidentified aircraft. No trace. That leaves the southern corridor, stretching into one of the most isolated stretches of ocean on Earth. And suddenly, the search is no longer regional. It is continental in scale. Australia assumes coordination of the southern search zone. Specialized vessels equipped with deep-sea sonar systems begin mapping the seabed. Aircraft fly long missions over empty water. Satellites continue scanning the surface for debris signatures. The area under examination covers tens of thousands of square kilometers. To understand the scale, imagine dividing an entire country into grids and then searching each one blindly. There is still no confirmed impact point. There is no emergency locator signal from the flight recorders. Underwater locator beacons, designed to activate upon contact with water, are not detected within range. If they transmitted, they did so in silence, beyond listening distance. Time becomes a critical factor. The ocean is not static. Surface currents shift debris unpredictably. Wind pushes fragments across vast distances. Even if wreckage is floating somewhere, it will not remain where it first touched water. And beneath the surface lies a deeper challenge. The southern Indian Ocean floor drops to depths exceeding 4,000 meters. In some areas, the terrain is rugged, uneven, barely mapped before this event. Searching at those depths is not like scanning a flat field. It requires slow, methodical sonar sweeps, line by line, kilometer by kilometer. Days turn into weeks. Still no confirmed debris field. No fuselage, no life rafts, no visible proof. Briefings grow more measured. The language becomes careful. Search efforts continue. Data is under review. But inside the operational rooms, the reality is clear. They are searching based on probability, not certainty. You have satellite arcs. You have fuel calculations. You have drift modeling. But you do not have the aircraft. And without the aircraft, every theory remains incomplete. By the end of the first phase of the Southern search, one uncomfortable truth has settled in. Even with modern satellites, advanced sonar, and international coordination, finding a commercial airliner in the open ocean is not guaranteed. The search is massive. The resources are unprecedented. The determination is real. But the ocean remains silent. And the longer it stays silent, the more one question begins to surface. What if the data is correct, and the plane is exactly where they think it is, but simply too deep, too broken, and too far to be found? The search moved south with precision, but the ocean answered with silence. Aircraft flew grid patterns over empty water. Ships traced calculated paths across coordinates defined by satellite arcs and fuel estimates. Every square kilometer was treated as potential ground zero. Crews leaned over radar screens. Sonar operators stared at shifting lines that represented the seabed thousands of meters below. Nothing. Then attention turned to the flight recorders. Each black box carries an underwater locator beacon designed to activate on impact with water. For approximately 30 days, those beacons emit acoustic signals, faint but detectable within range. Search vessels deployed specialized equipment to listen. They heard only the ocean. No confirmed acoustic pings, no repeating signal pattern, no pulse that could be isolated from background noise. If the beacons were transmitting, they were too deep, too distant, or already silent. Time was running out. At depths exceeding 4,000 meters, sound behaves unpredictably. Currents distort signals. Layers of temperature in the water bend acoustic waves. Even a functioning beacon can vanish into interference. And after roughly a month, the batteries expire. When that window closed, something shifted inside the operation. Until then, there had been an assumption. The recorders would lead the search. That technology would narrow the field. That the ocean, eventually, would reveal a sound. It didn't. Now the search depended entirely on sonar mapping. Slow, mechanical sweeps of the seabed. Kilometer after kilometer. Line after line. The area under examination was larger than many major cities combined. Each pass required hours. Each anomaly required verification. Weeks passed. Still no debris field, no fuselage sections, no confirmed wreckage cluster. Investigators began confronting a possibility they had tried to avoid. The aircraft might not be within the highest probability zone. The satellite data defined arcs, not exact coordinates. Small variations in speed or altitude could shift the final location by dozens of kilometers. In an ocean this large, dozens of kilometers is the difference between finding something and missing it entirely. Public updates grew shorter, expectations lowered. The phrase complex search environment became common. But behind that language was a harsher reality. The largest search operation in aviation history was expanding, and the ocean was still giving nothing back. Weeks turned into months. The search in the southern Indian Ocean did not stop. It slowed, deepened, and became more technical. Surface searches gave way to underwater mapping. Specialized vessels towed side-scan sonar systems just above the seabed, moving in precise lines, back and forth, across vast underwater plains and steep ridges. The ocean floor had to be mapped before it could even be searched. In many parts of the designated zone, Bathymetric data was incomplete. Some areas had never been scanned in high resolution. Before investigators could look for debris, they first had to understand the terrain. Underwater mountains, trenches, sudden drops, thousands of meters deep. The search became a process measured in kilometers per day. Each anomaly detected by sonar triggered a closer inspection. Remote-operated vehicles were deployed. Cameras descended into darkness. Grainy images returned to the surface. Rocks, sediment, natural formations shaped by pressure and time. Not aircraft wreckage. By mid-2014, the operation had already become one of the most expensive in aviation history. Australia coordinated the underwater search across a zone that eventually exceeded 120,000 square kilometers. The area was defined by satellite data analysis and fuel range calculations, a statistical estimate of where the aircraft most likely exhausted its fuel. But probability is not certainty. The longer nothing was found, the heavier that distinction became. Families waited for confirmation that never arrived. Public attention began to fade. Headlines grew less frequent, but underwater, the search continued in silence. Equipment moved methodically across the seabed, mapping, scanning, verifying. Still no debris field, no fuselage, no engines, no flight recorders. By 2016, thousands of square kilometers had been scanned with high-resolution sonar. Each completed segment was marked off. Cleared. Negative. Investigators began to confront uncomfortable questions. What if the aircraft descended outside the highest probability arc? What if the satellite interpretation contained minor timing errors? A deviation of even a few knots in assumed speed could shift the final resting place significantly. In a region this vast, a small miscalculation means everything. In January 2017, after nearly 3 years of intensive effort, the official underwater search was suspended. The aircraft had not been found within the designated 120,000 square kilometer zone. It was not declared solved. It was declared unresolved. The silence of the ocean had outlasted the largest coordinated effort ever mounted to locate a missing airliner. And just as the world began to accept that the aircraft might never be found, something unexpected happened. The ocean gave something back. More than a year had passed. The official underwater search was still ongoing, but momentum had changed. The ocean had swallowed every scan, every sonar sweep, every calculated line. Nothing definitive had surfaced. And then, on July 29, 2015, something did. Not in the search zone, not near Australia, not anywhere investigators had been scanning. On Réunion Island, a small French territory in the western Indian Ocean, a local man walking along the shore noticed a large piece of debris tangled in seaweed and sand. Sun-bleached, weathered, heavy. At first glance, it looked like part of an aircraft wing. Now imagine standing there. The wind is strong, the waves are steady. In front of you lies a curved section of composite material, scarred by salt and time. It is not dramatic. It is not cinematic. It is quiet. But it does not belong on that beach. Authorities are alerted. Photographs circulate. Aviation experts examine the structure, the shape, the hinge points, the internal markings. Within days, investigators identify it as a flaperon, a movable control surface from the trailing edge of a Boeing 777 wing. There is only one missing Boeing 777 in that region of the world, flight MH370. When French officials confirm the serial markings match the missing aircraft, the reality becomes undeniable. The plane ended in the ocean. For months, there had been doubt, theories, speculation, hope that perhaps the aircraft had diverted somewhere else. landed unseen, been misidentified. The flaperon destroys that hope. You are no longer searching for survivors. You are searching for wreckage. Ocean drift modeling begins immediately. Analysts attempt to reverse the currents, to calculate how the fragment traveled from a possible impact zone in the southern Indian Ocean to the western edge near Africa. The distance spans thousands of kilometers. The journey could have taken months, and that creates a new tension. If this piece traveled that far, what does it say about the impact location? Were the drift models accurate? Was the designated search zone correct? More debris follows in the years after. Fragments found along the coasts of Mozambique, Tanzania, South Africa. Some confirmed, some strongly suspected. All consistent with an impact in the southern Indian Ocean. But none of it tells you what happened inside the aircraft. You hold a piece of wing in your hands. You know it belonged to that flight. You know it crossed thousands of kilometers of ocean. But you still do not know why the aircraft turned south. You do not know why there was no distress call. You do not know what happened in the cockpit during those final hours. The debris proves the ending. It does not explain the story. And now, the tension sharpens. Because if the ocean is capable of returning fragments across continents, then the wreckage itself is still out there, somewhere below. And the search, once again, has to ask the same question. Did we look in the right place? Now you have debris. You have satellite handshakes. You have fuel endurance estimates. You have a defined southern search arc. So, what happened? Investigators begin building scenarios. Not rumors, not conspiracy theories, structured, technical reconstructions based on available data. One leading theory: hypoxia. If cabin depressurization occurred at high altitude, oxygen levels inside the aircraft could have dropped rapidly. Passengers would lose consciousness within minutes. The cockpit crew, even with emergency oxygen, would have only limited time. If the crew became incapacitated, the aircraft, on autopilot, could have continued flying until fuel exhaustion. Technically possible. It explains the long, silent flight south. It explains the lack of distress call. It explains why the aircraft maintained stable cruise for hours. But it does not explain the turn. Because radar data suggests the aircraft changed course deliberately after disappearing from civilian radar, deviating westward before heading south. That maneuver appears controlled, intentional. So another scenario emerges, a deliberate diversion, not necessarily malicious, not necessarily criminal, but intentional control inside the cockpit. Someone turns the aircraft. Someone disables certain communication systems. Someone allows the flight to continue south, away from major radar coverage. This theory aligns with the path reconstruction, but it opens a new void. Why? No confirmed message, no manifesto, no warning, no clear motive. Investigators examine pilot backgrounds, simulator data, maintenance records. Nothing definitive emerges. No mechanical failure is identified that would clearly trigger such a sequence. No system malfunction fully explains both the communications blackout and the sustained southern route. Another scenario: electrical failure. A cascading systems malfunction might disable transponders and communication links while leaving engines and flight controls functional. The aircraft could have flown under autopilot until fuel exhaustion. Again, technically possible. Again, incomplete. Because even in complex failures, pilots are trained to communicate, to squawk emergency codes, to declare distress. Here, the silence is prolonged and absolute. You begin to feel the tension in the reconstruction room. Every theory explains part of the data. None explains all of it. Satellite arcs show timing, but not altitude. Radar returns show direction, but not cockpit decisions. Debris confirms impact, but not sequence. The black boxes, the flight data recorder and cockpit voice recorder, remain missing. Without them, the final minutes are sealed beneath thousands of meters of water. So you are left with a shape of events. The aircraft deviates. Communications cease. It flies south for hours. Fuel runs out. It descends into the ocean. But between each of those steps lies a gap. And those gaps are where certainty should be. After years of analysis, official reports conclude that the aircraft likely ended its flight in the southern Indian Ocean. They outline probable pathways. They acknowledge the absence of definitive evidence explaining the cause. No confirmed mechanical trigger. No confirmed deliberate act. No confirmed final conversation. You have the framework of a tragedy, but not its core. And that is what makes flight MH370 different. Because most aviation accidents end with a report that closes the loop. This one ends with a model and a silence that still hasn't been broken. After years of searching, scanning, calculating, and recalculating, the outline of the story exists. Flight MH370 departed Kuala Lumpur. Communication was lost. The aircraft deviated from its planned route. Satellite data suggests it flew south for nearly 7 hours. Fuel was exhausted. It likely descended into the southern Indian Ocean. Debris confirmed that ending, but the center of the story is still missing. The cockpit voice recorder has never been recovered. The flight data recorder has never been recovered. No final transmission explains what happened inside that aircraft. You are left with a timeline, but not the decisions within it. In most aviation disasters, investigators reconstruct the final minutes almost second by second. Control inputs, engine performance, conversations in the cockpit, warnings, reactions, cause and effect. Here, that final sequence is sealed beneath thousands of meters of water. And that changes everything, because the difference between accident and intention is measured in seconds, in switches flipped, in words spoken, in actions taken or not taken. Without the recorders, those seconds are gone. The official underwater search, covering more than 120,000 square kilometers, was suspended in 2017. A later private search effort also failed to locate the wreckage. The designated zone remains the most probable resting place, but not a confirmed one. Somewhere in that vast stretch of ocean lies a Boeing 777. Somewhere inside it are two devices designed to survive impact, pressure, and time, waiting to tell a story no one has heard. And until they are found, every explanation remains conditional. The data shows a path. The debris shows an ending. But the motive, the trigger, the exact sequence inside the cockpit remain unknown. In a world where aircraft are tracked in real time, where satellites monitor oceans and airspace with precision, one modern airliner vanished and has not been fully explained. Not because the technology failed, but because the ocean is larger than certainty. What happened in those final hours? Was it a systems failure that unfolded silently? Was it incapacitation? Was it a deliberate decision? We have the coordinates of possibility. We do not have the moment of truth. And that is why Flight MH370 remains one of the most unsettling mysteries in modern aviation. Not because we know nothing, but because we know just enough to understand how much is still missing. And somewhere beneath 4,000 meters of water, the final answer is still waiting, unheard.